Good morning. My name is Jason Coyle, Operations Section Chief for Southwest Area Team 1. Today is June 21st, the first day of summer. And this is your morning operational update for the north zone of the Calf Canyon Hermits Peak Fire. We are still reporting the acres at 341,471. For, I believe, the third night in a row, we've been unable to get infrared, and we have no cause to believe that there has been any perimeter growth. The percent containment is still at 72, and I'll talk about that again in just a moment. And then there's 1,913 personnel assigned to the incident. So regarding containment, that number's been static at 72 for a number of days consecutively. And I talked before about some of the reasons why the containment numbers, when the fire grows, the containment number may stay the same, but about the unburned islands, the amount of perimeter, blah, blah, blah. But what I wanted to touch on this morning was just that we have normal processes for how we evaluate a part of line to say if it's secured. And kind of by default, those practices don't lend themselves well to areas that we can't access. So on the south of the Serpents Lake Trail on the west side of the fire, we haven't had anybody in there since the first significant rain event, and so we haven't been able to validate that unburned fuel or that reburn potential that we talked about before, that's no longer exists. I don't think it exists. Matter of fact, I'd be willing to take that bet that it doesn't exist in there, because there's not a canopy over it to protect it, and it was the duff primarily, so the organic material that was burning, and that stuff has had an opportunity to moisten up through the higher humidities and through actual rainfall. But we really like to get an infrared flight, and confirm that there's no heat in that area before we put some more black on the map. And that is not very much perimeter of the whole. Well, let me just point out it real quick. So that would be this piece right here, and might gain us a percent or two. And then if we went all the way down to the zone break on this side, that's probably, 20, 30 miles maybe. So that would raise the percentage. But we just haven't done that yet because we haven't got a flight. So fire's still going out. I mean, this rain, what's anticipated today, is certainly going to be very helpful, especially for the areas where there's not heavy timber. But until we can get some sort of affirmation that it's controlled, we don't want to call that section line controlled. And the main reason we don't want to do that is because it sets an expectation moving forward. So as we transition to a new team on Wednesday, then they may think that, oh yeah, we don't have to worry about that stuff, it's all contained. Because you see there's 680 miles of perimeter, and we're about 72% contained, so 560 miles-ish is contained. So we want to draw their attention to the parts that we're uncertain about. We don't want to make it look like the other 560 some miles. So anyways, that's the reason why. And I suspect the south zone has adopted a similar practice. It's pretty common. And so as we get more comfortable with the areas, with certain areas of the fire, then you'll see more black added to the map. Hopefully that makes sense. Before I talk about the actions that are planned for today, there's something that we went over last night that I thought would be useful to share with y'all. And so I talked about making decisions in environments of uncertainty. And that, it sounds, I don't know what it sounds like actually. It sounds kind of vague when I say it like that. And specifically what we talked about is this notion that we're all rational decision makers, and that we sit there and we decide, what it is we need to make a decision about, what our choice set is going to be, so what's going to be included in the different things we're going to choose from, if it's pizza or steaks or whatever. And then we set evaluation criteria. So, hey, I'm going to have the steaks because I don't know, that was a dumb example, but anyways, So I'm going to have the chicken because it's better for me. So that would be an evaluation criteria, is that chicken's probably better for you than pizza. And that's pretty good on simple decisions like whether to have chicken or pizza. When you deal with environments where there's a lot of uncertainty, that whole notion of us being rational decision makers kind of falls apart. And the reason it falls apart is that the way that uncertainty interjects itself is, or especially ambiguity, is it varies significantly. I think, and so the best way that I can explain that is to kind of give you an example. So when we're looking at an environment that we're trying to make decisions, then we talk about the ambiguity and the decision options, especially when a fire is moving. We talk the ambiguity and the decision options could be predicated on if we think we're going to get the resources we need. Like if we need 10 hotshot crews to implement this specific strategy, then whether we can get those hotshot crews or not is a source of uncertainty. And then that causes us to make adjustments to different plans, and you end up with these variations of different plans, and that creates more ambiguity. There's a few of them, but the preference for options. If the last 5 fires I've been successful going direct, so going right along the fire's edge and being very aggressive, then my default position is probably going to be I need to go right along the fire's edge and be very aggressive. And so that can create some uncertainty in the decision-making process. And the other thing is criteria for evaluating the options. This is especially important in the fire environment. I think it's going to be especially important over the next few days and honestly into the rest of the summer. And that is like, and why I say that's important is that this fire environment is what they call an open system. We don't, it's not like we can build a box around it and we can say, okay, these are the only variables we're going to manipulate. We're only going to slightly turn up the temperature. We're only going to slightly dry it out. We're only going to, slightly increase the slope. We don't get to do all that. There's a lot of different variables that we don't control that's in there. So when we set criteria for evaluating things, and honestly, we're terrible about this because as in the fire world, because we want to figure everything out. So we know what we can measure. And so those things that we can measure are what we use as the evaluation criteria. And the same thing I could see happening over the next couple of days is the things that we can measure. So one of the things we're measuring is rainfall, right? It's something that they're going to be measuring. They're putting rain gauges up there to measure it. And while that is certainly an important component, it is not the only variable that is of consequence. How severely burned the slopes are, now that's a harder thing to measure. The type of soil that exists on that slope above that's been severely burned is even a harder thing to measure. The amount of, this is a cool word, hydrophobicity. So it just means the amount of the resistance to take on water that the soil now has based on how hot it got and what different chemicals were around it when it burned, like from pine needles, things like that. So it can make it like kiln fire clay. It can maybe make it like 50% permeable. And so you got to put all those things together, and then you pick the ones that are easy to measure. That's just our human nature. So the ones that are easy to measure, rainfall. We can look at slope. We can look at a map. We say, "Yep, this is going to happen. This is not going to happen." But what that does is it sets us up for failure when the outcome doesn't match what was anticipated. So, for example, if we say that we put all these criteria together, and then there's a threshold that's set for rainfall, and that threshold is exceeded, and then there isn't a flood, our intuition now is that threshold is wrong. And so then we go forward saying, oh man, that threshold was wrong. So next time it rains that much, I'm not going to worry about it. Because last time it rained that much, nothing bad happened. Well, maybe the next time it rains that much, instead of doing it over 30 minutes, it did it over 15 minutes. Or maybe the next time it rains that much, it did it after 3 or 4 days of previous rainfall that saturated the soil. Or maybe next time it says it rains that much at whatever gauge measured it, it actually rained twice that much on the slope above your house that you're worried about. So lots of different inputs that can lead to uncertainty, and that creates complexity. So the data needs, we talked about that, getting rainfall gauges up, and then the data itself. And when you have a lot of, one more thing is that different sources of uncertainty call for different approaches. So if there's uncertainty about the quality of the data, you can go calibrate the rain gauge in this case. Or we can go make sure that our GPSs are, that we have, instead of estimating line, we use GPSs to tell you exactly how much line we've, or where the fire's edge is, something like that. And then there's the data needs. So that one's a lot harder because I'm not a hydrologist. I've never even played one in a movie. But if I was a hydrologist, I bet there's things that I don't know right now that I would like to know. And so those would be the data needs. So you put all that together. As we're going in today, the approach that works well, and it's pretty broad-based that it works well, is that when we're dealing with all these high uncertainty, we don't estimate a point like this is what we expect to happen today. It's not a go, no go. It's not a, it's gonna flood, it's not gonna flood. Talk about the range of possibilities. And so the reason you do that range is you try to incorporate that uncertainty into it. So you, and acknowledge it. So you know you're not positive. So if you're not positive about what's gonna happen, how could you land at one point that, yep, this is what's gonna occur? So think about that range of possibilities when you're out there today. Yeah, it could rain exactly what it says is the threshold, and it could not flood. There could be minor flooding, or there could be severe flooding. So from not flood to severe flood is probably the range that you should be thinking about. And you should expect whatever original estimates that are out there, that those are gonna need to be calibrated, and they will be calibrated over time. Could be calibrated that it means that there's less rain than they anticipated. Could be calibrated that means that there's more rain than anticipated. And then remember that there's parts of that environment that we don't control, or that we don't measure. I beg your pardon. A lot of it that we don't control. And those sometimes are more influential than the things that we do measure. And then finally, when we're dealing with high uncertainty, high consequence decisions, one of the best tools we have to approach those situations and maintain optionality, they call it, so maintain the ability to choose, is that instead of deciding, like, say if you're down in Albuquerque and you're gonna come all the way home to Mora, instead of saying, hey, I'm gonna drive home to Mora unless I hear that there's some flooding, even though you know it's gonna rain, even if it's today underneath a flood watch. The better solution is I'm gonna drive to Las Vegas, and then I'm gonna evaluate whether or not it's appropriate for me to go the rest of the way home. So those sound almost the same, but one creates a default position where going home absent any other information is what I'm gonna do. And the other one says, all I know I'm gonna do is go to Las Vegas. And when I get there, I'm gonna evaluate the appropriateness of me going the rest of the way home based on the conditions that are seen. So really, all that jibber jabber before was just to get to that main point about that I'd ask you all to be thinking about these things iteratively. So in little bites as you're moving forward through this. Understand that some of those estimates are going to be wrong. We just don't know which way they're going to be wrong. Think about it more in ranges of possibilities versus a point. And then know that over time, as we start to collect data, we're going to have a better understanding about what's going to occur. And I can think of examples on both sides. I can think of the Schultz Fire in Flagstaff where what they anticipated as far as debris flow was far less than what actually occurred. And then I can think of the Slide Fire in Sedona, where what they anticipated in debris flow was far greater than what occurred. And it's not that either one was right or wrong, it's that there's ranges of possibilities that we need to consider. And so that, the final point on the optionality thing is that make sure that you make your decision point so that going to Las Vegas and reevaluating at a point where you can choose. So the decision point, if you're gonna decide whether you're gonna go down a big tall slide, you wouldn't say, I'm gonna wait until I'm a third of the way down the slide and then decide if I'm gonna go down it, right? That wouldn't be a very good decision point. I'm gonna go to the top of the slide, I'm gonna decide how scared I am and whether or not I wanna wimp out and walk back down the stairs or if I'm gonna go down the slide. So think about that when you're making your decision points. Like, the reason I bring that up is if your decision point is, hey, if I hit debris on the road, I'm going to turn around. The assumption there is that you can, but you just know where the debris is right now. You don't know if since the time you've driven in this road under conditions that cause that debris to show up on the road, that now there's not debris behind you. So I just ask you to make sure that you make those decision points wherever you maintain that optionality and you have the ability to choose, and you're not forced into an outcome that could have a really terrible result. All right, hopefully that was useful. Please let me know in the comments if it wasn't. And then we'll go to the map real quick. So lots of green up here. Green slowly moving down to the south, and then they're going to be working in here on the A041, A023 road today. Early in the morning, if there's small pieces of work that they can get done in there. We're not going to commit people very far up any of these different routes today because of that anticipated weather. But working on repairing the areas where fence needs to be repaired, things where they can move back and forth and pick up trucks, things that don't require us to move in heavy equipment and excavators is something that will occur today. That's same thing down here towards Mora, past the fish hatchery. Same thing down here by Leduc's. Continue to work on the areas that they can easily gain access from to and that they can extract themselves from if this anticipated rain starts to occur. And as I reminded you yesterday, this area by Holman Hill on both sides of where the 581 comes down and ties in. Wait, is it 581 or 518? I mess this up all the time. 518, I think. Sorry. The road that goes by Angostura. They're going to be working in there as well. Having a rapid response task force that's going to be, they'll be assisting with some mitigation efforts with the FEMA type pre-flood work down here in Mora, in and around Mora first, and then they will go back up to the Sipapu Ski Resort, and that will be the area that they stage in the event that they're needed to help open up any of those county roads to gain access if there's debris flows secondary to the weather that's anticipated today. And then their second, the second rapid response group will be up in the National Guard Armory at our staging area in Taos in case they need to go over the top to deal with things from a different route. Northern contingency line, they got some rock in here yesterday on the road to help improve some of the conditions there to allow for better access. They're going to keep working on that. There's 4 pieces of heavy equipment that they need to get off of here today, and then they'll be able to work on making this road more all-weather so that they can finish all the cleanup and everything that needs to occur along this line in X-Ray and the line in Victor. Over in Division Oscar, they're continuing the work on the west end of the division where they have favorable terrain. And then in addition to that, we have an IA group that is ready to respond to any new fires, if there's any new lightning caused fires, any sleepers from the last, from the lightning we had a couple days ago, and also to bolster that rapid response task force and fill any other need that is necessary as we prepare for what is going to be probably close to a 24-hour event, and then more rain tomorrow. So the next 2 days are going to test a lot of the assumptions that are being made about the amount of rain that leads to significant negative impacts. And I ask you all just to please be careful as we're dealing with that. And just know that after 2 days, then probably have a better sense about what will occur and what can occur, and that things will get better. But if you're going to make estimates or judgments today, judge on the side of being safe versus judge on the side of being aggressive. Thank you.